Okay.
Live.
Yes. All right, we are live. So I will call to order the Monday, November 2nd meeting, regular city council meeting at 7:06 p.m. Chelsea, would you do the call?
Mr. Kelfy,
Here.
Ms. West,
Here.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Ms. Michael, Mr. Karas,
Here.
Ms. Wood,
Here.
Mr. Harper.
Here.
Okay. Do we have a motion to excuse Ms. Michael this evening?
So moved.
Second.
All right. The next item on the agenda is a moment of meditation and silence.
We have to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All in favor?
All in favor by signifying by saying aye. Thanks.
Aye.
Aye.
It's a technology thing. So
It's okay.
again, the next item on the agenda is a moment of meditation and silence. And would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the United
of the
States
United
of
States of
America,
America and to the republic
for which it
for which
stands,
it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and
With
justice
liberty
for all.
and justice
justice
for all.
We already called the roll. I apologize. I was getting ahead. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the regular city council meeting of October 5th, the special city council meeting of October 19th, and the special city council meeting of October 21st. Were there any questions, additions, corrections to those?
Make a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Is the audio coming across okay right now, or is it kind of garbled?
Background coming through. It almost sounds like someone's got the YouTube on in the background.
Okay. Well, I'm going to throw it to Kevin to talk a little bit about the cemetery history. In the meantime, I'm going to try and figure this out. So,
Okay, so thank you guys for inviting me to speak a little bit tonight. I'm Kevin Gray. I'm a reference librarian here at Reed Memorial Library. I'm also the Portage County Historical Society Vice President and Curator. And I've led historical walking tours at Maple Grove Cemetery over the past 4 years. Every year we've had a good attendance. I'd say there's been over 50 people each year, including this year. This year we had to do it a little bit differently because of COVID. So we broke it up into groups of 10 and did it throughout the week. So we had all those days fill up. So it's really popular as far as, being a historical draw here in Ravenna. That's not really surprising to me because it's really like an open air museum of everybody who's ever lived here. And a little bit of history, we really have to talk about, how the township was set up to begin with to, talk about the cemetery. And it goes back to 1796 when this was all Western Reserve land. And the surveyors came out here to survey it so that they could sell it. And the person that purchased the southern 2/3 of Ravenna Township, his name was Benjamin Tappan. Benjamin Tappan sent his son, Benjamin Tappan Jr., out here to sell the land for him. He was his land agent. And so he came out here in 1799 in June, and he became Ravenna's first settler. And he also gave Ravenna its name. He later became a U.S. Senator. And in 1808, Benjamin Tappan learned that they were actually dividing up Trumbull County into land to create a new county called Portage, and he thought Ravenna would be a good place for the county seat. And in order to do that, he had to survey and submit a town plat to locate the courthouse there. This is a picture. I don't know how good you guys can see it, but this is the original Ravenna town plat. This is Highland Avenue on the north. It's got Riddle Avenue on the south, Walnut on the east, and Sycamore Street on the west. So it's really kind of the core of Ravenna as we know it today. Most of the really historical oldest sections of town are in here. And if you guys can see right where my finger is right here on the bottom, this is labeled public burial ground. This is 180 feet wide by 180 feet tall. So that was land that Benjamin Tappan donated for the original cemetery here in town. If you go there today, there's actually 3 houses there. So those graves have been moved to where Maple Grove is today, but this is the first cemetery, no longer there. Those have been moved to Maple Grove. And so what happened to that little cemetery? They realized pretty soon that it wasn't going to be big enough. And, you know, they wanted it to be moved a little bit farther away from where people were living. So they built a larger cemetery up on North Chestnut, which became Maple Grove Cemetery. And that goes back to 1813 when the first burial there was established. It was Sloom and Smith. And second burial was Zenas Carter in 1815. If, you know, the Historical Society is right across the street there. The Carter House is Zenas Carter's family. That's the land that was donated for that cemetery there. Now, the cemetery up where Maple Grove is now was originally just a private cemetery. It was owned by those individuals who donated land to create kind of a private cemetery for themselves. In 1821, the cemetery was actually acquired by the township, and it was managed by the township trustees. Back then it was known as Evergreen Cemetery. Next on the line here we have 1852, where the village of Ravenna was organized. Village is the predecessor to the city. So 1853, they elected the first mayor here in Ravenna. His name was O.P. Brown. And cemetery kind of was managed by the township for a while. And then they noticed that it was really in need of improvements. By the 1870s, it was kind of overgrown. It was kind of a mess. The sexton who took over then, his name was Philo King, and he's the one that really turned it into a park. It became a place where people would want to visit and spend the weekend. They even had people go up there, you know, during the winter to ice skate on the ponds that he created. He was also responsible for the receiving vault that was built in 1879. 1885, the Ladies Cemetery Association was established. They set up a fund to maintain the graves, and they also built a yellow brick chapel, which I'm sure you guys know about, right in the front there. And so they set up a fund to maintain that chapel as well. Around 1900, graves were moved from another cemetery, Red Brush Cemetery. That was the one on Brady Lake Road, kind of near where Sunbow Valley Farm is. There's also houses out there now. 1910 is actually when Ravenna switched from being a village to being a city. That's when they had the census and they had enough people population-wise to become a city. They had 5,310 people in the 1910 census, and so that's when they formally became a city. Maple Grove continued to expand. They purchased land over the years, and it turned out that they were over, I think, 80 acres now. And burials increased. By 1959, they had over 10,000 plots of people buried there. So there's way more people buried in Maple Grove Cemetery than living in Ravenna today. 1960 was another important year. That was the year that the Ladies Cemetery Association disbanded. And those funds for maintaining the chapel and the graves were turned over to the township trustees. There's over 1,000 military veterans buried in Maple Grove, going back to the Revolutionary War. There's revolution, actually 2 or 3 Revolutionary War soldiers there, and then pretty much every war since then. And I also have a list of, some of the people I talk about on the walking tours. I have a list of about 50 people there that I would consider pretty significant. And we don't talk about the same people every year. There's, we rotate through every year. So there's maybe a dozen we'll talk about each year. But one of the most important politically, I would say, was Horace Beebe. You might have heard his house just burned down recently. It was on the National Register of Historic Places. And he was responsible for getting Abraham Lincoln elected. He was actually at the Republican convention in Chicago in 1860. And so he was one of the delegates who switched his vote to Lincoln and was responsible for Lincoln's, nomination to the Republican ticket. So politically, he's probably the most important person nationally buried there. There's also a Ohio Supreme Court justice. His name was Luther Day. He had a son, William Rufus Day, who was on the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, Frederick Loudon and the Fisk Jubilee Singers. They were famous back in the 19th century for touring Europe as musicians. Alfonso Hart is buried there. He was the Ohio Lieutenant Governor. One person I like to talk about is Henry Dewey Seymour. He was the person who invented the Quaker Man for Quaker Oats. The Quaker Mill started in Ravenna, and that's really the only monument to that here in town. Jonathan Sloan was a U.S. representative. Henry Swift was the first governor of Minnesota. He's buried up there. And Mary Brayton Woodbridge, she was a really important reformer in the temperance movement and also the suffrage movement. So lots of really important people there historically, not just for Ravenna, but for the country. And then pretty much every businessman or, important person here in town is buried up there. So like I was saying, it's really just amazing to walk through and see all the names of locally historic people. But I have questions, if you have questions for me, I have all kinds of notes here and stuff. So feel free to ask whatever questions you have.
I'm gonna ask, can you hear me? Good.
Kevin, until mid-90s, until the mid-90s, the cemetery was run by the township, correct? I mean, post where you left off.
Yeah, I believe in 1993 was when the city voted to exit from the township, and then that's, 1993 was, from what I can gather, is when there began to be a dispute about who would be maintaining the cemetery. Since then, yeah.
But prior to that, it had always been the township's the township trustees' responsibility.
Well, right, it was, because back then the land was part of the township. It wasn't until later that the city annexed that land.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I also have another map here. This is kind of showing, what it looks like today. Can you guys see this? So the original town plat I talked about was this little square in the center. All the red around the edge, that's all the land that's been annexed since 1853 to become part of the village and later the city. So the whole square is the township. This was what Ravenna Village started off as, and then the city kind of, used eminent domain or whatever to take, other additional land.
Hey, Kevin, do you have any background on the memorials?
Well, yeah, when you out there's all kinds of really neat looking logs formed out of cement and different types of monuments that there are. I was just wondering if you have any background on how those, I guess, became prominent out there.
It's a little muffled. I had a hard time hearing the question. Were you asking about the different monuments? Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really monuments, logs, benches, things like that. seems kind of interesting that, you know, that was something that people really put a lot of effort into at some point in time.
I'm still having trouble hearing. I apologize. Can you
No,
guys-
you're fine. It's technical issues on our end. It's nothing that you're doing. I guess just to paraphrase, the monuments that are there. Do you have any background on the stonework or just the monuments in general? I know
yeah.
that there's one specifically that has kind of look like logs that Frank was mentioning.
Yeah, we do have notes on those. And, you know, the first burials there, they would have originally had like a wooden board or something. We're talking about, you know, the 1790s, 1800s. So a lot of times they would just have like a simple wooden board with a name on it, or even just like a field stone, because, you know, back then there was really no transportation to get permanent headstones. And some of those have been replaced since then with more, you know, permanent ones. So the first earliest stones, the oldest ones there are made out of what they would call a type of sandstone, and a lot of those have like a really good details on the carving. Later they switched to marble. Marble are the more white stones, and those have been really affected by acid rain lately. You know, a lot of them are illegible because of all the erosion that's occurred on there. The one he was talking about with the tree stump, that was kind of a popular motif back then, and it was carved out of sandstone. I think it was the Holcomb monument. That's the really big family plot where the whole section is put together to look like trees and logs. So it was, you know, a really decorative thing. And that was really the late 19th century when it was becoming more of like a park-like environment. It had to do with a lot of the landscaping they were doing. That's when Philo King was going through and digging out the ponds. The ponds were decorative, and they also helped with the drainage problem they had there before that.
And what about the family, the slave family that came up from the Kentucky area? Is that right?
Yeah, those were the Brantley family. And the Brantleys, they actually, Henry was a slave. He was born in 1825, and his wife Rebecca was born in 1833. And they were slaves up until the Civil War, when Henry managed to escape and he came north. And the story about the monument there goes that Cornelius Reed, who is the judge here in town, he's also who Reed Memorial Library was named after, he managed their estate after they passed away, and they hadn't left any heirs. They had no children. And so he used the funds that were left in their estate to put up that monument to them. And that's why it's got, you know, big shackle on there that says freedom, kind of in honor of what they did.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions?
I just wanted to say that I didn't do the cemetery tour this year. I did it last year. A lot of great information, a lot of great Ravenna history, whether it's the city, the township. So there's a lot of great history there. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
I just want to say thank you, Kevin, very much. It's very interesting to hear that information and get it out. Hopefully people are watching and will learn some more about our town.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And are you doing any of the tours coming up, or are those kind of off until spring or summer next year?
Yeah, we're done doing walking tours for this year, but I will be doing more walking tours in the city of Ravenna, and also the next cemetery tours will be in September. We've tried to do them in September every year because that seems to be the best weather for us.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time and coming on and working through the technical issues that I'm having on my end. But
No problem. If you have any questions, just feel free to email me, or, you know, I can contact you if you need anything else.
okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, the next item on the agenda is the report of officials, and everyone should have received them via email from Chelsea. So is there any questions regarding those? Do we have a motion to accept those reports?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the report of committees. The next committee meeting will be November 16th at 5:30 p.m., starting with utilities. Mr. Moskin.
At this point, there will be one item on the agenda.
Okay. Information systems, Ms. Wood.
Tonight, we have one item and to be determined for committee.
Planning, Mr. Karas.
We have one item on the agenda tonight, and we will be having a meeting 2 weeks from tonight.
Thanks. Committee of the Whole will be on November 23rd at 7 p.m. Next item is Public Health and Safety. Ms. Michael's not here, so we'll say that's to be determined at this point. Streets and Sidewalks, Mr. Harper.
I have nothing for consideration this evening and nothing on the agenda for committees at this time.
Okay. Personnel, Mr. Calfee.
Nothing for committee meeting coming up.
Thank you. Community and Economic Development, Ms. West.
Nothing coming up as of right now.
Okay. And any updates, Mr. Harper or Moskin, on the cemetery? You guys had a board meeting?
Yes. There will be a sum of $6,250 appropriated for a leaf machine that it's expected to be at the cemetery, hopefully in operation by the end of this week. And it's made by a company called Billy Goat. And he'll be getting it through Koya, and that had to be ordered. That's why it's taking so long. And there wasn't, Jason Kettner will be at, the way it is now, at the next cemetery board meeting.
Okay.
Matt, do you have anything else that you'd like to mention?
That pretty much covers it, but they are without leaf removal equipment at this time, so that purchase is pretty necessary. They currently have pile of leaves out there that you would lose a car in. So it's important that this piece of equipment gets here sooner than later so they can get that cleaned up.
All right, thank you. Well, we
Yes.
will move on to first reading of ordinances, starting with ordinance number 2020-122.
An ordinance to accept, record, and appropriate the ODNR Outdoor Discovery Grant for the new Parks and Recreation Department Archery Program and declaring an emergency.
And this is sponsored by Planning, Mr. Karas.
This is a grant we applied for earlier in the year. We got it. So we're just allocating the money so that we can receive the grant and start the program. There is a 25% match, and we've got that taken care of.
All right, any questions on this particular ordinance? We're hearing none. Do we have a motion to waive the rules?
Motion,
Second.
Mr. Kelfie,
yes.
Ms. Wood,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes. So moved.
Second.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfie,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Ms. Wood.
Yes.
We're not hearing you, Andrew.
A motion to adopt the ordinance?
So moved.
Second,
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Ms. Wood,
yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate it. I'm trying to go back and forth with the muting so there's no feedback when Chelsea's speaking, since we're in the same opposite ends of the room, but same room. All right, the next item on the agenda, we've only got 5.
Right.
So
The next item on the agenda.
ordinance number is 2020-123.
An ordinance to approve the purchase of cyber insurance from At Bay Insurance Services LLC for the sum of $7,292 and declaring an emergency.
All right, and this is sponsored by the finance director.
We discussed this one in both committee meetings. This At Bay quote was determined to be the best combination of price and coverage for the newly added cyber insurance. And I think we all realize the cyber insurance is an important aspect of our insurance program.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Huff on this? Hearing none, do we have a motion to waive the rules?
So move,
Second.
Ms. Wood,
yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes.
And to adopt the emergency clause?
So moved.
Second,
Ms. West,
Yes.
Ms. Wood,
yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes.
And a motion to pass.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Ms. Wood.
Yes.
Okay. That ordinance is adopted. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2020-124.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor to accept the third federal CARES Act coronavirus relief distribution of $409,402.09 and to appropriate the funds and declaring an emergency.
All right, this is also sponsored by the finance director, Mr. Huff.
Yes. Thank you. This one we discussed in committee as well. This is the third round of the funding, and we've already received these funds from the county, so they're already sitting in our bank account. So this will just give us the authority to appropriate them.
Any questions on this? Do we have a motion to waive the rules?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Ms. Wood,
yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes.
And to adopt the emergency clause?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Kelvy,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Ms. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes.
And finally, to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Ms. Wood.
Yes.
All right, that ordinance is adopted. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2020-125.
An ordinance to appropriate $345,000, $183 from Fund 407 to Fund 670 to repay the water fund for the Enterprise Parkway loan principal and declaring an emergency.
All right, Mr. Huff, this is also sponsored by Finance.
A lot of fun things I get to talk about here. We discussed these in committees as well. This is because we refinanced this loan earlier in the year, and we got a borrowing with Hometown Bank. And these funds will go back into the water fund, and the future debt payments that we have to pay on this will come from an assessment on the affected property owners for this project.
Any questions on this ordinance? Do we have a motion to waive the rules?
So move.
Second.
Ms. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes.
And to adopt the emergency clause?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Ms. Wood.
Yes.
And finally, a motion to pass the ordinance.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Ms. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper.
Yes.
All right, that item is adopted. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2020-126.
An ordinance approving the transfers and advances for the month of September 2020 listed on Exhibit A attached here too and declaring an emergency.
All right, and this is sponsored by Mr. Huff as well.
I like that word here too. That's a nice one. We discussed this in committee as well. These are just normal advances from a grant, so we have to pay those back.
All right. Any questions on this? Do we have a motion to waive?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Ms. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas.
Yes.
And to adopt the emergency clause?
So
So
move.
moved. Second.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Ms. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Harper.
Yes.
And a motion to pass the ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Kelfy,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Ms. West,
Yes.
Mr. Moskin,
Yes.
Mr. Karas,
Yes.
Ms. Wood.
Yes.
Okay, that'll do it for first reading of ordinances. We have nothing on second reading or third reading. Is there any old or new business to come before council this evening? Well, Mayor, do you have any remarks this evening?
Just a few. First of all, I'd like to thank Judy Watkins and her crew and Ryan from the chamber for the event at the city park. last Saturday. That worked beautifully. And many of the parents asked that we would do that again and possibly use the same procedure if we're still dealing with coronavirus, which we probably will be when Easter comes, to run the Easter thing somewhat similar to that. But that came off without a hitch, and it was very well done. So my congratulations to them for putting that together so that we did have some impact with that. I heard you talking earlier about the door-to-door, and kids were out and trick-or-treating on the 2 hours that we had set aside for that. And for the most part, they were following the rules, for at least the ones that came to our house with that. Right now, the plans for the Christmas setup and the Midnight Madness, it's not fully developed because we're not sure about getting a bunch of people into stores elbow to elbow at this point in time. And I've sent a number of memos out through Tim Content to our staff to be continually vigilant about the precautions for the COVID virus, that we can't let our guard down. We've been fortunate. We've only had one person get infected with this, and it was a mild infection, but it's something that we have to keep after every day and not forget what we're doing with it. And finally, I think I've announced this before, but it finally is for sure. Riddle Block 9 was sold and transferred last week. So we'll have a new owner, and that's the building where the cafe is, the yellow brick next to Guido's. We are working on the demolition of the old Oak Rubber on Chestnut Street. The biggest problem we have there is there's no owner. He's passed away. His kids want no part of it. They don't want the liability of having it. And we're having serious problems with people trying to live in there. We do have a gentleman that has been looking at that building for possibly scrapping it. But we're going to try and get it down. It's an attractive nuisance and it's dangerous. As far as the homeless situation, for well over a month now, there's been very few homeless in the downtown area. I've seen hardly any on the courthouse lawn. My biggest fear is that they're in another building down on Lake Street, but we've not seen very much activity in the downtown area. Now that could change tomorrow. You never know, but we've gone 4 weeks without much to do about that. But I am concerned where they are and if they're safe with that. I'll stop with those comments at this particular time.
All right. Thanks, Mayor. And I will say, with all the technical glitches tonight, thanks for hanging in there. And with that being said, I've had conversations with Katie. So we will be switching eventually from Zoom to WebEx. So there will be a new meeting link. We've tried it out. Simple. Right now, the issue is patching within City Hall with the cables and stuff. So that's the reason our computer isn't actually recognizing some of the microphones. So in short, there'll be an update here soon from myself or from Katie, on next steps on meetings over Zoom. So, but as the meeting or the mayor was talking about, now that it seems, my audio, is it okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to keep talking if it's lagging or anything, but I do want to say, and I wanted to say this earlier, and echo what the mayor was talking about with the pandemic. It's kind of gotten, I don't want to say normal for us to meet over Zoom. Obviously we want to meet in person, but just want to bring that back to the forefront as we're moving towards the winter time. All of the updates that we've seen, encouraging people to do the same things that we were encouraging them to do in March and April, sanitizing, wearing their masks, because we're seeing the numbers go up. And the fear is that they don't slow down over the winter time. So I just wanted to bring that back to the forefront. You know, I don't like meeting over Zoom, but this is kind of the world we're living in right now. And we've kind of gotten used to it in some ways. And I don't want to get used to it. I just want to remind people, you know, that we are living through a pandemic right now. And I feel like we've lost sight of that for a little bit. Gotten used to meeting over Zoom and all the technology. So just wanted to mention that. And then obviously something the mayor and I talked a little bit about is tomorrow's election day. So don't forget to vote if you haven't yet. But with that, is there anything else from council before we adjourn?
Yeah,
All right.
I just thought of this pertaining to Midnight Madness. Is there a prospective date to make a decision to be informing the public on this?
Well, it's always the day after Thanksgiving.
Well, what I meant was how many days or weeks in advance so that people know whether it's going to be canceled or going forward.
There'll be some sort of thing that night. It's difficult right now. We're trying to get the parade coordinated. There were some new ideas about the parade, having it stationary and have the people drive by. I don't think the folks with the balloon affair envision a parade not moving. Ryan is working on these particular things. So Paul, I can't tell you specifically right now. That's something we're working on daily.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add quickly, I think that our community has done a great job with thinking outside the box a little bit. The chamber and Leda Northeast did a great job with the scarecrow competition. Although the last couple nights after the windstorm, some of them started to look a little rough. But it was really neat to be able to drive through town and see. And I know me personally, a lot of the adults with developmental disabilities that I have the honor to work with worked on a lot of those. And it was really important to them. So it was a really neat to see our community come together in that way, even during a pandemic. So.
And it helped the business up across from the high school, the place that had this little summer market. They made the kits for the scarecrows, and Ryan asked them how many they sold last year, and they didn't sell any. This year they sold over 100.
Oh.
So it helped them out also.
All right. Well, then with that, if there's nothing else, I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Our next city council meeting will be on December 7th this year. So have a good night. Remember to vote. We'll see you for committee meetings.